Good morning and welcome to our annual Carlisle Memorial Day Ceremony. When planning this year's program, the state was under strict COVID-19 health safety regulations. We knew the historic Veterans Memorial Courtyard on the square would simply not be large enough to handle the social distancing that was required at that time. And we did not know what the future might hold as far as new and different or perhaps even more strict regulations. As if they could read our minds, the leadership of the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center reached out to the Carlisle Joint Veterans Council. Their message was, we'd like to do more to help the local men and women who served in the armed forces, this area's veterans. And they asked, what can we do? Well, we never expected to get the answer yes when we asked if they would host this year's Community Memorial Day Ceremony. Not only did they agree, but they also embraced it. And they worked with us every step of the way. And it happened here today. We extend a heartfelt thank you. We look forward to working together with them in other future endeavors that will bring this area's veterans to this wonderful facility and to provide an extended helping hand to those that need it as well. This is a true historic treasure here in our own backyard. If you haven't yet, take time to visit the indoor museum, walk the outdoor heritage trail, and attend the numerous educational presentations that they offer inside throughout the year. It truly is unprecedented. Excuse me. The first Memorial Day isn't something Americans talk much about. If we knew our history, we'd all know that Memorial Day is far more than an opportunity to fire up the barbecue or get to the lake for the first time. The holiday is an extraordinary celebration of America's values, history, and traditions. But it does get a little sloppy, this holiday, originally called Decoration Day. Waterloo, New York was recognized as the official birthplace of Memorial Day by federal legislation in 1966. Waterloo was one of the first towns to close their businesses to honor the war dead. However, over 20 towns around the United States claim to be the birthplace of Memorial Day. Communities holding on to this designation and distinction of having the first Memorial Day include Boalsburg, Pennsylvania. We've all seen that when we travel up to Penn State for a football game. But there's also Columbus, Georgia, Columbus, Mississippi, Carbondale, Illinois, and on and on and on. So while several towns claim to be the site for the first Memorial Day celebration, one man, John A. Logan, deserves much of the credit for the establishment of Memorial Day as a national holiday. Upon the outbreak of hostilities in 1861, Logan volunteered his services as a soldier. He was later promoted to the rank of regiment colonel. Logan led that regiment into combat for the first time at Belmont in November of 1861. He proved to be a natural military leader and later fought with distinction at Fort Donelson, Corinth, and Vicksburg, and he rose to the rank of Major General of the Volunteers. Following the Civil War, General John Logan was instrumental in the founding of the Grand Army of the Republic, a veterans group comprised of Union Army soldiers, and he served as the second elected National Commander-in-Chief of the GAR. On the 3rd of March, 1868, he issued General Order Number 11, which called for a National Day of Remembrance for Civil War Dead. The order served as the basis for what became the national holiday of Memorial Day. Originally called Decoration Day, Americans took time to decorate the graves of soldiers who gave their lives in the Civil War. Today's national holiday of Memorial Day honors all American soldiers who died in defense of their nation. But wouldn't it be a real honor to all of those men and women who gave their last full measure of devotion to this country if Congress were to return Memorial Day to May 30th instead of the last Monday of May, which doesn't really honor our fallen heroes? No, that just gives us, most of us, another 3-day holiday weekend. Personal opinion. So now I would like to ask you to rise, please. If you would, turn to this direction, salute the flag, for our national anthem. If you would please remain standing for the invocation by the Reverend Walter Reed.
Gracious and Heavenly Father, once again as we come together as thy children, to pause, to remember those who gave up and made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. To the men and women who served in the armed forces, who's made that ultimate sacrifice, we praise you, Lord God, and we thank you for those people. For without them, we may not have the freedoms that we possess today. Lord, continue to be with us. And as we go through the rest of the day, that we continue to remember those who went on, to remember those veterans who placed and made the ultimate sacrifice for us. Father, we thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
You may be seated. Our music today is provided by a combination of bands. We're excited to have the Carlisle High School Band with us, and also the Carlisle Town Band. So we have the young musicians on this side, the older musicians on this side, but actually we put them together so they sound great, and they're under the direction today of Mr. David Orr. Would I have a music selection from them? Thank you very much for the fine musical selection. Beautiful day. If you listen to the words or think about the words of that song, today is ideally fits the words of that song. One of the toughest things over the years for me to do, we have had some great speakers at our Memorial Day and Veterans Day ceremonies. One of the toughest things was always been to having to introduce that individual before they make their remarks. Well, it's easy this year because we brought a friend along to do that job for me. We didn't know each other real well, but about the past 6 weeks we've got to know one another fairly well. He's a Carlisle native. He played with the great Pittsburgh Steelers for a couple of years. He moved on to do bigger and greater things, but he remained a good friend with our guest speaker today. So it's my honor to introduce Matt Kranchek, who will introduce our Memorial Day speaker. Matt?
Wonderful. Oh, it's so nice to be back in Carlisle today. I don't get home that often, so it's wonderful to be back here. Although I must admit, it's been a little bit challenging. About 2 or 3 times just this morning, I was asked if I played football on the Steelers with Rock Bleier at the same time. And so I'm not sure if that is a testament to how good a shape Rocky keeps himself in, or if I've let myself go a little bit. I guess we'll find out later. But being back in Carlisle for Memorial Day is not something that's unfamiliar to me. I can remember the parades as a kid. I can remember my mother taking my sister and I over to visit my dad on the courthouse steps as he slept outside to raise awareness for POWs. You know, we grew up around a military family when I was a kid. We talked about hospital corners on our beds and gig lines in our attire. And I've predictably rebelled by making my kids do the exact same things. But it wasn't all bad. And the Charlie Mike attitude, or the continue the mission that my dad would always preach, was one of the reasons that I was able to persevere and ultimately achieve my dreams of playing professional football. For those that don't know, I was a 2004 draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers and was a member of the 2005 team that ultimately won Super Bowl 40 in Detroit. Thank you. Sorry. So the time that I was in Pittsburgh, I played tight end, but I played a lot of special teams. My job was mostly to run down on the wedges and break off the kickoffs and things like that. So I like to think I was a pretty tough guy. And I could never have done the things that my father and the veterans did over in Vietnam. You know, my dad served honorably and was awarded 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for Valor over in Vietnam, and he's truly my hero. Now, I want you to close your eyes and just imagine doing both. Being a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers and winning not 1, but 4 Super Bowls. Being over in Vietnam and losing part of your foot. Being awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. And being one of the most admirable men I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Rocky Bleier today. Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much, and ladies and gentlemen, indeed. It's a pleasure for me to be able to be here on this Memorial Day, to be able to share not only this beautiful day, the sunshine, but to be with fellow veterans and those who have served our country. And those family members that are here, that military life has touched their life, losing loved ones in the past. So as I was trying to prepare for this awesome task today of being a keynote speaker, I got to thinking, this day was created 153 years ago. So there's been a lot of Memorial Day speeches from the beginning up through now, touching upon the sacrifice of our beloved, of our service people, who gave their all to serve our country. So then I got to thinking, well, what more can I say or give on this Memorial Day? Well, let's start from the beginning, which is that, as we well know, Memorial Day is a day unlike any other. As I said, from 1868, we have come together in communities, cities, and towns to place flowers, of course, and flags on the graves of those who have given their last full measure of devotion to our country. On this day, as tradition dictates, as we saw, that the stars and stripes are raised briskly in this wind on this beautiful day to the top of the staff and then solemnly lowered to half staff, where it remains until noon. It is then raised to full staff for the remainder of the day. The half staff, and this becomes important, remembers the more than 1.4 million women and men who have gave their lives in service of their nation. At noon, their memory is raised by the living, who resolve not to let their sacrifice be in vain, but to rise up in the stead and continue the fight for liberty. The meaning of Memorial Day is in memory. With this in mind, we know the true meaning of this day: to honor and remember all those American soldiers who died defending our freedom, our right to be free. But in memory, let's not forget those quiet professionals who answered that noble calling to serve the people of the United States in peacetime as well. And let's not forget those who lost the fight against COVID over the last year and a half, or sustained the statistics of 22 suicides a day. People who fought for this nation, came back, but had to live with the wounds of war. Now, in the book River Horse, the author, William Least Heat Moon, wrote that our physical components change every year, so that our brains continuously pass memories off onto a complete stranger. Now, if memory were total and complete, perhaps we would be one person from start to finish, but forgetfulness cuts us off from who we've been, so that hourly we're reborn. Now, I tell you that in the context of the fact that I am now in my 8th decade of creating memories. And although I may not be the same person I was when I was walking in the rice paddies in Vietnam, or the last time I wore a uniform in the National Football League, but the highlights of my life, much like the highlights of each and every one of our lives, are forever etched in our memories. It's not that I have forgotten what took place in my life, but it comes to a point in time when sometimes the good people I speak to has forgotten who I am and how I single-handedly won those 4 Super Bowls for the Pittsburgh Steelers during that period of time. But we need to never forget those quiet people who helped us along the way, who were there when we needed them for support, a kind word or a helping hand, people who gave us hope. Well, you see, the one business that we're all in, if you get to think about it, at this moment and stage in our lives, that we're really all in the hope business. You know, that little kernel of belief that we could achieve something within our lives. Because all our lives are based on hope. And mine started, and I have to share this with you, that little kernel of hope that something could be accomplished, with probably the greatest football game I ever played in. I was 9 years old. I was playing Dickie Weisgerber, my next door neighbor. Now, being born and raised in a small Midwestern town, Appleton, Wisconsin, for us cheeseheads, I mean, football was a big part of our lives. I mean, Dickie and I had an extensive schedule. We did have home and away games, and the first game of that season was an away game for me, so of course I had to go across the street to pick up Dickie and play on his side lawn. But let me tell you, what a game. I scored 51 touchdowns that afternoon. Thank you very much. More importantly, I shut him out. I mean, the sucker didn't score. I mean, think about it. That's 357 to nothing. Oh, my God, it was a game of skill and will. Now, just because of the fact Dickie was 5, I mean, shouldn't take anything away from my personal achievement. He was a big 5. He was a tough kid, and so on. But we need to thank the people who along the way helped us reach the potential that we got. We should thank the Gold Star mothers, the VFWs, the Wounded Warriors, and every foundation and service in our local communities that support veterans and their families, because they help us along the way. Now, I grew up across the street from Dickie, as I'd made mention. I grew up in a bar, a neighborhood shot in a beer joint. Met a lot of great people who walked through those doors and sat on those stools across from my father. Met a lot of wouldas and couldas and shouldas, as we all have in our lives. You know, Rock, I could have played. But I blew my knee out in 2nd grade. Oh, you know, just never been the same. Or I should have played or would have played. And there's always reasons why sometimes those childhood dreams didn't come to fruition, but hopefully we've been able to learn from them and use them as a stepping stone to propel us in a new and different direction. And Dickie was never a would have, could have, should have guy, and we competed, in the neighborhood, pickup games, rec leagues, organized sports. And one of the things that I learned early, much like I learned later in the service, that there was always a catalyst that would pull individuals together. And because of the success of that team, you get recognized for your contribution. Oh, coming out of high school, and because of that, I got a chance to continue my education and went to the University of Notre Dame. And because of that, there was a catalyst that would pull individuals together. And by my junior year, we won a national championship. I was captain of my football team, and because of that, teamwork, I got a chance to be drafted in the NFL by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, just to put things in right perspective for those who don't know the story, it was, not their first choice. I did not make their top 10 list. I was the 417th person picked in the draft that year. I was a 16th round draft choice. But you have to understand, there were 17 rounds. At least I was not the last guy pick. I might have a chance to make this team, I said to myself. People said, well, how did you make the team back then? Well, do you remember who played for the Steelers in the 60s? That's how come I made the team, because nobody could remember who played for them during that period of time. And I got a chance to play 10 of 14 games that season when I was sitting in front of my locker room at Old Pitt Stadium. And the locker room there was laid out like every locker room before or since. Lockers were on the walls and players were on the perimeter. In the middle was a laundry basket with a couple tables. And one of the tables was where all the fan mail would be deposited for the players. Well, it was a place I had never visited from that first day of training camp up through that 10th game of the season, not when you're the 417th person picked, playing on a losing team. No one knows you exist. My mother, God rest her soul, never even sent me a letter. But all of a sudden, one of the equipment men hollered, "Hey, Bleier, there's a letter over here for you." Well, I stood up maybe a little too quickly. You ever do that? Get a little lightheaded. Gathered myself together, sauntered over the table as if I'd been there before, thinking to myself, now who's writing me a letter? Maybe it's a Notre Dame fan that wants an autograph from a former captain. I got to the table and I perused through the mail. Maybe some of you have been through this experience. And I picked it up, my first piece of fan mail. I opened it up, slipped out the paper inside. It was from my uncle. My Uncle Sam. Greetings, it said. We'd like to inform you that you've been inducted into the armed services of your country. Now, I have to tell you, that was the worst fan letter I've ever received. Now, for those Vietnam veterans who are sitting out there and been through that same period of time, I wasn't necessarily embracing my soon-to-be current change in life. Now, we had some options back then. You could leave the country. Some people were doing that. Yeah, no, not me. Well, you could not report. Consequence, go to jail. Oh, that's even worse. You could apply as a conscientious objector to that conflict. But what was I going to object about? You could enlist. That was a 4-year commitment. I mean, being drafted was only 2 years. I mean, I did have things to do. You could join the Reserve National Guard, but this was 1968, height of the war. All those spots were filled. I was quickly running out of options. And we had a game against Cleveland before I had to report. And I thought to myself, hey, you might have another option. What if you got hurt in that game? You might not have to report. So in that game against Cleveland, let me tell you, I threw my body into every Browns jersey I could find, and those stupid Browns couldn't even hurt me when I wanted them to. I was selected as Special Teams Player of the Week. Thank you very much. But when I knew I was going to go, there was a certain relief because there was a part of me that wanted to live up to my responsibilities. I mean, what would I tell my kids if they ever said, hey, Dad, what did you do during the war? What if I truly disappointed my folks? First letter I wrote home was something like this. Dear Mom, Dad, hey, Vietnam's really not as bad as I thought it would be. You know, we're on the ocean side. It's quite beautiful here. Sometimes we're allowed in it. Temperature is 80 degrees, heat's about 100 degrees, really makes you feel cool. Damn. How many kids just like me wrote that same kind of letter home the first day they were in country? Yeah, Ma, it's a tropical paradise. Now, I didn't get to Vietnam until May of '69, and I wrote home often. I'm going to tell you just the way it is, I'd write. So if you want something to worry about, I'll give you something to worry about. Then I'd write ha, 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 ha. I mean, that was my mode of action. I mean, there's no Skype, text, tweets, posts back then. Hell, I could be dead before they got my letter. So I wrote to them about the elephant grass. It was tall and sharp. About the leeches that were short and sharp. But the wait a minute vines. You'd be on your patrol, 100 plus degree temperature so hot and make your nose bleed. The temperature would decompress this body from over 200 pounds to 170 pounds. Come across these vines that had thorns on them like little fish hooks. And all of a sudden you get caught, and the more you try to get yourself untangled, God, just the more you got yourself tangled, and the only thing you could holler was, wait a minute, until you got yourself untangled. I wrote to them about the Viet Cong were farmers by day and killers by night. By my luxurious air mattress and poncho liner used as a blanket. How when it rained, the mud turned into rivers. And when it did rain, it was the only time that you got a chance to bathe. How we were in the same clothes 2-3 weeks at a time. I don't think that I wrote to them about the snakes or the occasional Bengal tiger. I really didn't want them to worry. When we were on patrol, I thought I could handle combat, all right? You know why? Because I was taught by the nuns. What was combat like? Well, it was like 16 years of Catholic education. It was like that, okay? I mean, so I thought if I could be flip about it, I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to think about how ridiculously unfunny it really was. So when the bullet entered my thigh and I was laying on the ground, blood was pouring in my pants, I thought about the nuns, one in particular, my 6th grade teacher, Sister Lair, and all the stories that she told us about those soldiers in Korea in World War II. That when the blood started to flow, they started making deals. That's how some of them became priests. And I thought to myself, well, that's where I'm starting my business bidding. So you get me out of here, and I'll become a, well, I wasn't going to become a priest. Okay, fine. So what else you got? In 4 days, I was going to go to leadership school where I had the chance to test out of combat. 4 days. But this was not August 24th, this was August 20th. And bleeding was the best you could do because guys are dying, not making deals. They were dying. We had a young kid in our platoon. His name was Hawaii because he was from the islands. 19 years old. Took 2 in the gut in front of me, went down, never got up. 19 years old. Had a fiance somewhere halfway across the Pacific, the really beautiful Pacific. 19 years old. So with a bullet in my thigh, panic in my chest, I still had my weapon. A grenade launcher. And let me tell you this, I was launching grenades not knowing where they were landing. I mean, we were getting hammered. I put my head down for a second, maybe reconsidering the priesthood, when all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a grenade come flying in and hit my commanding officer. Bounced off of him, rolled between my feet, and it went off. Blew up through my right foot, knee, and thigh, and again we were in another firefight. Till platoon finally fought its way down, dragged us out of there. Now I was on a poncho liner, 170 pounds of dead meat. They just dragged me and dragged me and dragged me through the night as best they possibly could. They got to a point where they couldn't drag me any further because they'd been fighting all day as long. They said, don't worry, we'll send a stretcher back for you. When out of the darkness, 2 black hands reach down and pick me up. Throws me over his shoulder and starts carrying me to the helicopter. Now that helicopter was a long ways away, and this black soldier would put me down, my blood all over him, catch his breath, pick me up again, and continue on. And he got me to that chopper and put me on it. And I never saw him again. Didn't know his name, where he came from. But I'm here today because of a colorblind soldier. Back in 1969, who knew the difference between he being black or I being white. But we were brothers in war. So I got to a secured area, finally got to Da Nang. IVs in and out of my body, morphine drip. And all those questions that we have at time of needs of why me, now what, what's going to happen, took place. When across from me was a young soldier, it was a triple amputee. And you think about people who help you along the way. And every day that I was there in that ward, the aides would come to take him to therapy. And he'd grab that little trapeze that swung over his bed and swing his torso into a wheelchair. And on the way out, he'd stop by every bed. And it wasn't a big ward, and he'd stop by my bed. And he'd say, hey, how you doing today? You know, you look better today than you did yesterday because, let's be honest, when you got here yesterday, you looked like shit. Now listen, we got some good docs here. We're going to take care of you. We'll get you out of here. I'll see you back in the real world one of these days. And I thought, wow. I mean, if anybody could be embittered with their lot in life, it would be that young soldier. But yet he chose to make a difference. Yet he chose to have a positive attitude. And I thought, wow. I mean, if he could have an attitude like that, what about me? I'm going to walk someday. And I got to Tokyo. After several weeks, I finally got enough courage to ask my physician whether I might be able to come back and play this funny game called football again. Now his response to that question was something like this. He said, don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. Just don't expect to get back in the gridiron. You won't have the strength or the flexibility. But as my authority figure, he just sucked that hope right out. 2 days later, unbeknownst to me, I get a postcard in the mail. A simple postcard. It's got 2 lines on it. It says this: Rock, team's not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney, owner of the team. Wow. Somebody needs me. No, they didn't need me, but somebody just took the time to care. People that help you along. And being the family that they are and were at the time. They'd bought me 2 years. And they finally made the team. Got a chance to play. Special teams. And then because of an injury, got a chance to break in the starting lineup. And the rest of me becomes history. 4 Super Bowls. Franco and I become the second set of running backs in the history of the NFL, each to gain 1,000 yards rushing. And after 12 years, I retire. But I think about that story in the context of those of us who have the ability to touch and change people. We honor those who served. We honor those who have given their life, obviously, in that memory. But it's the impact that we have every day in anybody's life to be able to change it just by a simple thank you for your service, for your commitment, for honoring those who have served and gave their life, but to continue on what this country is all about and what we leave behind. It's up to us to tell future generations of the stories that we lived in the past, the stories that we create today, and the stories that will be in the future that make us the people that we are and the country we live in. So on this Memorial Day, I want to thank you here for that ability, for your service, for your commitment in honoring those, of course, that have passed, but more importantly, supporting those who will continue this on. So thank you very much.
I've had to follow a lot of speeches with proper comments. I'm speechless, Rocky. Thank you very much. Now, some music by our combined band. Again, we express our appreciation for the ability to pull two of our wonderful musical organizations from Carlisle together and to provide us fitting music for our day. It's been a tradition for years and years and years that we just take a moment out at this time to recognize those men and women who served in our armed forces and who have passed away from May 1st of 2020 through April 30th of 2021. If you could show us some solemnness while we do their names and the conflicts that they served in. Cornelius N. Allen, Korea. Frank J. Escani, Korea. Donald S. Austin Jr., Vietnam. Lindsay Bales, Korea and Vietnam. William J. Bailey, Korea and Vietnam. Foster E. Baker, Korea. Clara V. Bolsover, World War II. Bernard Banks, Vietnam. Paul Laverne Barkley, Vietnam. Ralph G. Bean, Korea. Robert W. Baer, World War II. Peter Hayden Bennett, Korea. William Edwin Bickhart Jr., World War II. Creedon Elmer Bixler, Korea. Robert Faw Broyles, Vietnam. William R. Bubb Sr., Vietnam. Charles E. Elliott, Vietnam. Charles Renal Elliott, Vietnam. Robert F. Franklin, World War II and Korea. Paul Richard Gorell, Vietnam. Guy Diesel Jr., Vietnam. Paul K. Haupt, World War II. Donald Kenwood Heishman, Korea. Joseph R. Horn Jr., Korea. William D. Jarrett Sr., Korea. Ernest Randall Johnson, Persian Gulf. Stephen D. Casarada, Vietnam. Robert L. Kelly, Korea. John Joseph Kirch, Vietnam. Bill R. Kirby, Vietnam. Richard Douglas Knox, Korea. Francis Hubert McGraw Jr., Vietnam. Frederick G. McLaughlin, Korea. Ollie Alfred Mick Jr., Korea. Mark B. Middleton, Vietnam. Richard E. Miller Jr., Vietnam. Kenneth A. Mullen Sr., Vietnam. Benjamin F. Naylor, World War II. Peter M. Nesbella, Korea. John Michael Oberg, World War II. Charles J. O'Hara, Korea. Foster Dan Priest, Korea. Thomas S. Provenus, Vietnam. Randall F. Rakers, Vietnam. Lloyd A. Reed Jr., Vietnam. Lee G. Rhodes, Korea. Donald A. Richmond, Vietnam. Donald H. Rose, Korea. Dennis Lee Seiler, Vietnam and Persian Gulf. Charles McCall Sharp Sr., Korea and Vietnam. Sterling S. Schaefer, World War II. Richard Shelton, Korea. Robert W. Schreiner, Korea. Lester L. Sipe, World War II. Ronald Carl Snyder, Vietnam. Tommy C. Stauffer, Vietnam. Danny V. Swearingen, Korea. William M. Teeter, World War II. Milton A. Thompson, Korea. Frederick A. Umholtz, Korea. Arthur G. Upperman, Korea. Richard E. Warren, Vietnam. Richard S. White, Sr., Vietnam. Andrew S. Zanook, Korea. Now, if we remain standing, we'll place the wreath. Will be followed by rifle salute and taps.